he was on the same train as me, and I was like, how can this guy be sitting in first class when his staff's not even being paid?
We don't know if the next game will go ahead, but all we're going to try and do is keep the club running as long as we can.
In that moment, when all the fans were on the pitch and literally would not leave, I think he realised, oh, actually, this could happen every single week.
Oh, sorry, Enzo. It's one of those things. He goes, why are they playing me at right back? He goes, I'm a forward. I'm a forward, he goes. I went, you're joking? He went, no, I've never played right back in my life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 13, unlucky for some, everyone who's listening may be, of The Circus Upstairs.
I'm James Masters, journalist, and very excited Leyton Orient fan.
I should say James is excited because we've won a few games and there's an outside chance we might make the playoffs. I would say an outside chance will be slightly outside the playoffs, probably on goal difference. I am Matt Simpson, once attacked on Twitter by Orient midfielder Jimmy Smith for suggesting that his profile pic looked like George Michael in the Club Tropicana video. He was #fuming about that.
Jimmy Smith.
Do you know I'm deliberately and recklessly trying to alienate more and more of our audience by making the Orient jokes more and more niche? Anyway, let's move on, James, and try and claw back everyone else who's listening. Can you recap where we got to at the end of episode 12?
So, by March, Francesco Becchetti, no longer to be seen anywhere around the club, had decided to simply stop paying staff and players. Manager number 11, Omar Rizza, is forced to play 8 or 9 youth players every game, and despite the best efforts, Orient were relegated out of the Football League for the first time in their history after a defeat at Crewe.
Absolutely. The club was in total turmoil. There were still 2 more games to play. None of the staff and players were being played. And as you say, James, Becchetti had completely disappeared by this point, and it was left to COO Vito Michelli to try and deal with the situation on the ground. We spoke to Community Liaison Officer Howard Gould about what was going on at the time.
Vito would be the one who would come to us or come to everyone in the office and say, don't worry, the money will go in the bank, even if it's at the last moment, it will go in. And when it didn't go in, again, he was embarrassed. He said, I'm sorry, I was told that the money would go in. I can only tell you, and we couldn't, what can we do? We can only have a go at him. We can only shout at him, but he took all this flack, and I felt a little bit sorry for him in the end because he was this mouthpiece. But we said to him, Vito, how could you work for this guy? You're still working for him. You know how bad he's treating people. You know how he's killing this club, and you're still working for him. And he just shrugged his shoulders. And he said, I still have to have a job. It's my job.
Do not feel sorry for Vito before you say anything, James. If you're about to say you feel sorry for him, were you about to say that?
Absolutely not.
Good. If anyone listening had even the slightest bit of sympathy for him, I'm just going to play you this clip from our friend, journalist Shona Duthie, who was also covering Orient for the local press at the time, with a little story about our friend Vito Michelli.
I remember getting a train, and Vito Michelli actually got on the train, but he got on first class. And so he was on the same train as me. And I was like, how can this guy be sitting in first class when his staff's not even being paid? So I kind of sauntered down the train and spoke to him, and I was like, are you going to give us any comments on why, the staff aren't being paid and you're sitting in first class? And he just kept giving no comment, no comment, no comment.
No sympathy for Vito.
No sympathy for Vito. First class. I'll stop there.
One of the many staff not being paid was Kitman A. DeMartin, and we spoke to him about how difficult that was at the time.
You do it for the sake of the club in the end. We've tried to communicate with Mr. Becchetti, but he still won't speak to the staff, and we don't know if we're getting paid or not. We don't know if the next game will go ahead, but all we're going to try and do is keep the club running as long as we can, just to try and get the games done and all that. Even though we're getting relegated at the end of the season, you just didn't want to see the club die or go. In the end, do you know what? Money weren't that important. No one was destitute. I know that the fans raised some money for everyone, which was dished out to all the staff. But you just wanted to carry on. You know, you become immune to it in the end. Everything that was going on, you just wanted to get on with it.
Well, I mean, you guys have so much respect from the fans for doing that, because it must have been really difficult. Like, were you angry?
Nah, you just in the end, you just accept what was happening. You know, you're there, you're trying to do a job, and you just try and get on with it. The anger goes at that point. It really does. You just carry on. It's just something inbred in you when you're at a football club. You just want it just to try and carry on with as much normality as possible, even though it's going down the pan.
However, on the 25th of April, it emerged that players, though not all of the staff, were finally paid their wages for March, so almost a month later. Now, with Alessandro Angileri no longer coming to the games, it meant that stadium announcer and the man behind the pre-match, mid-match, and post-match song choices played through Orient's tannoy, which was built in 1882 and has caused deafness to many people over the years. He was literally free to play whatever he wanted. And what fans started to notice, and we all found very amusing, was that his choices were pretty subversive comments on what was going on at the club. So he played Taxman by the Beatles, Charmless Man by Blur, Frankie by Sister Sledge. He didn't quite have the guts to play I Fucking Hate You by Godsmack, though. Let's have a listen to what Phil said.
Because he stopped turning up, and any person for that, you know, like Alexander stopped turning up, and you just knew they weren't going to be there. I remember being on Twitter and asking people if they got any suggestions, and that's how it sort of came about, and people had some really nice suggestions. It was just something, you know, fun to do, really. I remember I can't remember who got sacked, but someone got sacked. And the last game before that we lost before they went, I played Should We Stay or Should We Go, literally as the final whistle went. And again, that sort of was clock going, you know, that's the sort of PA saying that they should go, and they were actually sacked. But I would never, ever think you had any influence over that. It's just an excuse to play the odd song that means something to people.
I love Phil for that. So, next game, with relegation confirmed, was a home game against Colchester United. We were losing 3-1. There were 7 minutes to go. Then what happened, James?
Well, I was sitting in my seat, pretty depressed, and all of a sudden, from the south stand, I think it was, Matt, a red flare was thrown onto the pitch. That flare then sparked all kinds of madness as hundreds of Orient fans suddenly ran onto the pitch and decided, nope, not today. No more football will be played today.
You were on the pitch, weren't you?
I was on the pitch. You were on the pitch, weren't you?
We saw each other on the pitch.
It was an incredible moment, wasn't it? So Flair goes on the pitch, and suddenly everyone is on the pitch. I don't really know how I got on the pitch. My legs I think they're working independently of myself. And there was a wreath on the pitch all of a sudden. Someone put a wreath on the centre circle. There was singing, there was shouting. The Colchester fans must have been completely bemused by the whole thing. And people were tweeting about it. It was going viral. And then my phone was going off because I think Five Live were calling. They wanted to talk to me about what was going on. And suddenly people were taking notice of the fact that, hang on a minute, Orient being running to the ground. What's going on is an absolute disgrace. How could this happen? How could the Football League let this happen? What about the fit and proper test? Yeah, the fit and proper test. It was absolute madness that suddenly, after all the shenanigans, after all the bad headlines, in the end, it took the Orient fans running on the pitch to say, hey, look, this isn't right. This shouldn't be happening. Why aren't you listening to us? I don't know how you feel about running on the pitch, Matt. You know, some people think it's the wrong thing to do, that you should never run on the pitch. We were so desperate. We were so desperate for any attention, for anyone to recognise our plight. It was the only thing left to do, really.
I wouldn't run on the pitch if it was just me. And I definitely wouldn't do that naked. But it felt like the right thing to do. For all the reasons you've just said, that was a very passionate and articulate speech, actually. And I agree with all of that. Like, we were so desperate. We were getting so little help from the football authorities in a situation where we had an owner who was as far as I'm concerned, literally trying to sink the club on purpose, that it felt like we had nothing else left to do. Let's get some perspectives from some of the other people that were there on the day. First, here's Tom Davies, who's the vice chair of the Leyton Orient Fans Trust.
See, everyone took part in that pitch invasion. I mean, it was a pretty unanimous occasion, and Colchester fans applauded us. It was completely. There was no sense that it was a bad thing to do. It was completely, in the circumstances, completely necessary. I think all of us have indicated in doing it.
And we also spoke to Omar Rizza, the manager at the time.
Again, it was a matter of time. You know, they were just waiting to burst. You know, whether it was planned, obviously, and yeah, for me. It was just like, you know what, I've tried to do everything I can over the course of this whole mess. The fans are venting their frustrations. Didn't really affect me. It is what it is. You know, these are the things that happen. These are the things that occur when clubs are not run properly. And they needed to make a stand, and they felt they made a stand. And I remember having conversations. I mean, they wanted me to go out on the mic and talk and say, like, please get off the pitch. And I thought to myself, what am I going to be able to do? Why are you putting me in this position? You know, for what reason? Like, it's not going to help nothing. I'll go out on the pitch. I went out on the pitch and spoke to people, and, you know, and that was all. I tried to help again, you know.
What were people saying to you on the pitch?
They were saying, you know, it's nothing about you, Omar, nothing about the players. This is purely like the owner. We've had enough. And, you know, they were just being honest. And I knew that anyway. I knew it weren't about us. I knew they weren't protesting about us as a staff or us as players. They didn't even need to explain that to me. So I knew that. I could tell that from the way the fans had followed us right till the end of the season. So, no, I knew what it was. I understood it. I dealt with it.
What did you say to them?
I was like, yeah, I know, I understand. You know, I get it. I totally understand. I know the pitch has got to be, you know, I was trying to explain to them the pitch had got to be clear to finish the game. And you know, they weren't happy about that. They didn't want the game to be finished. And I said, look, this is a situation. I understand all your frustrations and stuff like that. And, you know, it's a shame. It's come to this point. Just went out there, and which I was uncomfortable doing at the start, because I felt, you know, what am I going to be able to do? This is pent up frustration over the course of 3 years or whatever it might be. What am I going to do? What, you know, they're not going to listen to reason. So, yeah, one of those things.
And here's local journalist George Sessions.
I honestly think that if the fans hadn't have done that, I'm not sure Becchetti would have actually left in that summer. I think he probably would have carried on because he thought he could, because he just kind of seemed to have this in his own head, this kind of invincibility that it didn't matter what people thought of him, he would just carry on doing what he did. But I think in that moment when all the fans were on the pitch and literally would not leave, I think he realised, oh, actually this could happen every single week next season if I don't actually get rid of the club.
So you'll remember what happened next. We were on the pitch, I'm going to say, for about half an hour.
I'm not sure, maybe a bit longer. It felt like we were there for a long time. But anyway, they were trying to get us off the pitch for a very long time, and we wouldn't go. And in the end, there was an announcement to say the game had been abandoned. So I guess we've done our job at that point. We thought, well, fair enough. Okay, we've done our job. I think we've got some attention. I think people have heard what we've got to say. Let's go home. Maybe stop off, get some hummus or something. Lovely. So that's what I did, Matt. I drove back towards home. I stopped off at the supermarket because I fancied some hummus. And then I checked my phone, and turns out while I'm in the aisle at Waitrose, the game hadn't actually been abandoned. They just told us it had been abandoned to get rid of us all. And then they started replaying the game in the final 7 minutes.
I'm still getting my head around the hummus connection. How is that relevant?
I still remember holding my pot of hummus as I scroll through Twitter, and I can still feel the rage whenever I eat hummus now. Whenever I eat hummus now, I just think EFL betrayal. I'm
just getting my head around this insight into your life, that the thing that's made you more angry than anything else in the whole world drove you to go to Waitrose and buy some hummus. That was your reaction to it.
I don't know if I went in for hummus. It's just what I found at that point. I needed something that was going to just give me a little bit of love. And my favourite hummus is not from Waitrose. Any hardcore hummus fan would say they would not, it's not where you go for it, really. I'm not proud of it. But at that point, I was just so upset about the betrayal of the EFL that I didn't know where else to go.
So not only did Francesco Becchetti relegate your football club to the National League, nearly put your football club out of existence, but he's also sullied the taste of hummus for you forever and a day. You're the real victim in this.
I know.
Let's get back to the football. You are absolutely right to say that after all the fans had been cleared away and emptied the stadium, the game then continued for the final 7 minutes behind closed doors. What actually happened in that is none of the players chose to engage competitively in those 7 minutes and just casually knock the ball around between each other. So let's get a few takes on that. Firstly, Omar Reza.
Yeah, so the I know I got a lot of stick for that as well from some fans saying, "Oh, he's out of order. He's let the game go on and this and that at the time." And I was like, I know the referee was in conversation with the FA and they were chatting about how they were going to deal with the situation. And the referee that called us two managers, I think it was me and was it John McGrill? I think at the time called us over and said, "Look, this is what's going to happen. We're going to try to clear the pitch and then we will finish the game off." I was like, if that's what needs to happen, that's what needs to happen. Who am I? I'm just following the letter of the law at the end of the day. So that was happening once the pitch was going to be cleared, and then was in the dressing room and the boys were like, we ain't going to go back out, or this. They were contemplating whether they were going to go back out. And I said, well, there is no, are you going to go back out? You're not going to go back out. They're saying you need to go out and finish the game off. Now, I think we had to wait 10, 15 minutes or whatever it was. And then they went out there and they played, but they didn't play. They just passed the ball around. I think it was 10 minutes left or something like that for the integrity of the game. They didn't really play. It was just sort of pass the ball around, no one getting after each other, and it finished like that. And that was the end of it.
Did you tell them?
Because I thought, no, I didn't tell them anything. I knew they were going out on the pitch. I thought we were going to just play properly for 10 minutes, but they sort of just done what I said. They kept the ball, and it was, what was the score that game?
3-1, was it?
It was 3-1, yeah. So it was just me being my competitive self is going to score a goal if you can, or I was looking at it like Adebayo or Alzati. Go and get a goal in League Two. That's how I was looking at it.
And then here's Michael Clark, who was playing in the game on those final 7 minutes.
Yeah, I was about to take a throw in, and that's when I was on the complete other side of the pitch to the tunnel. And yeah, just remember people coming left, right and centre on the pitch. We all went back in the change rooms and just were sat there like, well, now what? And there was talk of the game being abandoned and replayed on the following Tuesday. We sort of went back out to see what was going on and we shooed back inside. But at that point, I think Errol McKellar was on a microphone telling everyone they need to leave. But yeah, it was some time after that we actually came back out and finished the game. But that time in between, we were just sat in the change room, like, what is going on here? Like almost, yeah, in disbelief.
I don't know if you remember, but essentially fans were tricked into leaving because they announced that the game was abandoned.
Yeah.
And then obviously you guys came back on. Like, were you aware that the game was always going to be replayed the last 10 minutes, or were you in the dark as well?
We were in the dark until the fans had sort of started filtering out, and then so we were told to sort of stay warm as much as you can do in a changing room, just in case we did have to go out and play. And then yeah, it was obviously agreed between the officials and the staff that we'd go back out and finish the last 10 minutes or whatever it was. We literally, yeah, came back out, did a quick warm up, and then what happened after that happened.
So obviously the ball was just kicked around. Like, did someone instruct you to do that?
I don't actually, it was just done amongst both sets of players, I think. Yeah, I remember speaking to Macaulay Bonne, who was actually playing for them at the time. He's just joking, saying, let me score, that sort of thing. But no, everyone was just sort of really tentative. You didn't know, we was obviously knocking the ball about, but you kind of felt like at any moment you could get pressed and start playing properly again. So it was just a really sort of cagey 10 minutes where, because it hadn't actually been agreed, no one was sort of sure that we wouldn't start playing properly again. So whilst from what you may have seen, it looks like we're all just kicking the ball around and everyone knows what's going on. I really wasn't sure. And you still had George Elokobi on their team, sort of instructing all of his players, like squeeze up, shift over, that sort of thing. And we're just passing the ball around. So that sort of added to the effect of not knowing whether we're coming or going, or whether we're actually going to start playing the game at some point. Yeah, I think the main reason why we didn't is because we didn't have a warm up when we came back out, and we literally kicked the ball around for a little bit and was ready to go again. But yeah, 20 minutes, perhaps even longer after what had happened, I think the general consensus was we can't just play as we were, because everyone would be at risk of injury.
So surreal, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely bizarre, but also brings into question that that favourite saying of the EFL, the integrity of the game. That's what we hear, isn't it? Every time something like this happens. What about the integrity of the game? The integrity. Well, where's the integrity of telling supporters that the game's been abandoned? Please go home, vacate the stadium, and then bringing the players back out to have a 7-minute kickabout where there's no competitive nature to the game whatsoever. I would have no problem with them playing out the final 7 minutes after telling fans to get back into the stands. The fact that we were told the game was abandoned, sent home, and then they carried on, I just thought was outrageous. Absolutely outrageous.
As you're saying, James, the EFL were not popular at all with Orient fans. So all the way through the game and many games before that, there were chants of fuck the EFL. The Colchester fans were joining in with the fuck the EFL chants. So just maybe help explain, like, why were people so incensed with the EFL at this point?
A couple of reasons. One, EFL intervened when everything was going pear-shaped with Becchetti. I think we'll have some explanation. Their powers are actually quite limited as to what they can and can't do. I think there was a kind of almost misunderstanding about how they can interfere in club matters, but there was still palpable disappointment and disgust at the way that the fans were treated over that Colchester game. And I think those two things together really just led to this this real dislike, to be polite, we'll use the word dislike, of the EFL, and this growing frustration that nobody was doing anything.
Right, let's hear from Tom Davies to get his perspective on the role of the EFL.
Yeah, we did have some direct contact. It's when Sean Harvey I wasn't at a meeting myself, but Sean Harvey was the chief exec of the EFL at that time. And he had a sort of bluster to the way he dealt with us, apparently. He didn't particularly, very sort of not me gov kind of response. And there wasn't really a great deal of empathy coming from the EFL at that point.
What were you talking to them about?
Initially, can you do something about this rogue owner? He's not a fit and proper person. You could ban him from football. You could disqualify him from being a director for a football club. And Orient was a private business, and that's the way football clubs are set up in this country. But there was a lot more that the EFL could have done in terms of action on his suitability to run a football club in the first place, and certainly by this point.
But you didn't obviously have any joy with those conversations with the EFL.
No, there was. They said, they acknowledged that it was a bad situation and we had a bad owner, but there wasn't any sense of. Wasn't even really a sense that there needed to be reform down the line.
Because they seem solely concerned with the integrity of the league.
And that was a phrase they used, something about we're not a regulator, or we're not a governing body, we just arrange the fixtures or something like that. And it was, they were utterly kind of saying that nothing else is their responsibility, basically.
As you know, this podcast is all about balance, and we are duty bound to present different viewpoints. So we spoke to Matt Porter, former chief executive of Leyton Orient, pre-Becchetti, and he helped explain a little bit more about what the EFL were and weren't empowered to do. I was joking about this podcast being balanced. You didn't laugh there. You thought I was serious. It's not balanced, is it? But we are going to listen to this clip from Matt Porter.
Fans were getting very frustrated at a lack of action from the EFL. But I think you've spoken before. There's not a lot the EFL can do, is there?
No, there isn't. That's the thing. And it is difficult for fans because they obviously see their club being, and I'm not just talking about Orient fans here, but loads of different clubs over the years. They see their club being torn apart before their eyes. But essentially, the club is an independent business, and that business is governed by the laws of the United Kingdom. So if that business is not breaking any laws by operating in the way that it is doing so, it might not be operating very well, but if it's operating legally, it's very difficult for the EFL to step in and do anything there. I mean, the other system is like the MLS, say, in America, where every club's got a license and a set of rules it has to follow about, spending and transfers and whatever. And if it doesn't follow them, then it gets its license taken away. Well, the EFL doesn't operate really under that basis. That it doesn't have a huge amount of leeway to phone up a club and say, yeah, we don't really think you're being very prudent here, or you're being a bit wasteful. You shouldn't be paying that player that much money, so you're not going to be allowed to play your fixture on Saturday. It doesn't work like that, or we're going to take the club. The EFL hasn't got the power to take the club back off the owner because the owner legally owns it. That's the way companies are. So as frustrating as it is for fans, and I get that, and the EFL are now doing a complete governance review with a view to trying to stop these people being able to take over clubs in the first place, which is really the crux of the matter. But again, that's challengeable because ultimately, if the person hasn't been convicted of any offences or they've served their time or whatever, then it's difficult for somebody to turn around and say you're not allowed to buy this business. And that's actually what it is. It's Leyton Orient Football Club is a limited company. It's a business as much as it's a football club. In the same way that a supermarket is a business or a car dealer. So it is hard for the Football League to step in where a club's being run badly. But I guess the governance review will aim at making sure that that perhaps there's more checks on people during the acquisition process.
What kind of checks go into the fit and proper test? Because I think there's a lot of mythology around that.
It's called the owners and directors test for a start. It's not called the fit and proper persons test. It's called the owners and directors test, and it's a single sheet of paper. Pretty much, you fill in your name, your address, previous convictions, and then they do a background check on you in respect of were you ever declared bankrupt, have you committed a serious crime, anything like that, and that is it.
I think that will surprise a lot of people, won't it? It's so easy.
Yeah, maybe. Although I think people probably know that now. But again, it comes down to legally what if you burgle a house 20 years ago and you got 5 years in jail for it, but when you come out, you've served your time, and then you're entitled to have another go, if you like, at life. And it's difficult to turn around to someone who essentially is probably buying a business that in a lot of cases might be going out of business anyway. A lot of clubs are sold because the owners run out of money to fund them and doesn't want to keep doing so. That club might not be around for much longer anyway. So someone who comes along to try and rescue it can be difficult. A lot of people don't have the right motives.
I love the owners and directors test. Are you a serial killer? No. Right, you're in.
Does sound very simplistic, doesn't it?
Matt, as always, speaks a lot of sense. He's very informed. He's very measured. But my position remains, fuck the EFL. 6th of May, 2017 was Orient's last game in the Football League. So that was away at Blackpool. Blackpool, who were also facing their own difficulties with their owner at the time. Both Orient and Blackpool fans protested again before the game about what had been going on at their clubs and how they were being run. But more importantly, there was a very significant goal in that game. Could you talk us through that?
Yeah, so Blackpool, I think, were going for the playoffs, and we were obviously going into non-league, so there wasn't much on this for us. We were 2-0 down after 36 minutes, and then 5 minutes into the second half, something happened that would transform a bit part player into an almost cult hero-like status. Jens Jans. Remember Jens Jans? Of course you remember Jens Jans. He's the answer to every quiz question. Who scored Orient's final goal in the Football League? Jens Jans scored it. And it was a decent finish too.
So Jens Jans, for everyone's reference, was one of Rob Gagliardi's signings from an obscure part of Europe, which I think was the Netherlands.
Yes, that very obscure part of Europe, the Netherlands, yes.
So it was somehow fitting that he would score our last goal in the Football League. Let's listen to a couple of takes on that. First of all, journalist Shona Duthie.
Jens Janse. I couldn't believe it when that goal went in. I was like, did I just see him scoring? Like, that can't be right. Seriously. It didn't last long, obviously, because Blackpool went on to win that game. But yeah, I was speechless.
And here's Kitman Ada Martin with a revealing insight that might help explain how Jans executed such a cool finish.
Nice fella. I think he plays at home to Plymouth and gets sent off, don't he? Oh, sorry, Jens. It's one of those things. He goes, why are they playing me at right back? He goes, I'm a forward. I'm a forward, he goes. I went, you're joking? He went, no, I've never played right back in my life. And and if you look at the goal we scored at Blackpool, he really put it away well. He put it away like a really good forward. And he'll go down in history as the last player to score a goal in the league for us at that time, wouldn't he? Old Jens. But it's funny. Funny, I'm a right back. I'm playing right back, goes, I'm a forward.
That's funny, no one realised where he was supposed to be playing.
That summed it up. That's one of those things.
It's, of course, completely fitting that Orient's last goal in the Football League would be scored by someone signed by an Italian translator who'd inadvertently been played in the wrong position the whole season. I asked manager Omar Rizza whether he was surprised when Jans scored.
I wasn't surprised, no, because Jens, whatever anyone thought about him, he was hardworking, he was honest. Whether he performed at the levels that maybe he should have done is a different story.
Well done, Jens.
Well done, Jens. I mean, Jens went on, I think he went back to Holland to play for a little bit. And we did try and get him on the podcast. We did. I think he's working in business now, but he didn't reply to any of my 375,000 messages on LinkedIn. So we wish him all the best.
He was our number one target, wasn't he?
When we first talked about this podcast, he was the one guest we really wanted to get.
We were like, this podcast will not stand up unless we get Jans. And that's proved to be true.
I think that is going to be the one thing that prevents us from winning an award on this podcast.
If anyone is still listening by this episode.
I doubt they are, man. I did have this thought earlier. We could just talk about anything now, and I doubt anyone would even say anything.
I feel like if anyone's still listening, they might have been hopeful that we were going to bring Jens Janse on to talk about that final goal and have stuck with us through all these episodes just for that. And I mean, we really haven't. We really haven't got him.
He wasn't the worst of the random signings that we made.
Who was the worst? Name names.
Oh, I mean, that is a competition in itself, isn't it? Who was the worst random signing that we had? I think it was probably
Plasmati.
Yeah, I think Plasmati's got to be up there. Yeah.
Some final thoughts on the season. Firstly, here's Michael Clark. What a lovely guy. We asked him if there were any lessons learned from this complete shit show.
I think not to sort of underestimate how important it is to have support on and off the pitch. As much as looking from the outside looking in, it might just seem that you've got the best job in the world. You're playing football and getting paid for it. There's a lot that's needed in terms of a platform for it all to go well. And that showed with the Italians, whether it was players not playing as well as they could have done, influenced by what was going on. I'm sure that was a factor, but it just shows you that you need stability and almost to be in a routine of the right things, as opposed to having drama left, right and centre and not being able to fully focus on the football. And almost in disbelief, like had the past 3 years really happened like that, like going from League One playoff final to the conference. Like you kind of look back and think, how's that even happened? I don't think any of it really sunk in until probably a year after. Once I'd sort of grown up a bit. But do you know what? It's probably when I came away from Orient that I'd realised how crazy it was. And because my whole time in the professional environment was under the Italians, I didn't know any different. So having come out of that and been involved with different setups, you realise how ridiculous the whole thing was. It was great for us, obviously, being able to experience first team football when we may not have had those opportunities without all that was going on. But yeah, at the same time, it was literally a circus at the training ground.
Nice of Michael to inadvertently reference the name of this podcast. And then we heard from Tom Davies, Vice Chair of Loft, how he felt throughout this tumultuous season.
Yeah, it was really stressful, actually. I was pretty stressed out. And because you start to forget, you forget about the football at that point. Just think, well, how are we going to keep this thing going, or can this thing be kept going? And a hell of a lot of anger, because if you sort of been following the sort of wider sense of how football's been going, so why are football clubs allowed to be run by people like this? Why the footballers? Why is there such lax regulation of how football clubs are run that you can allow someone like this who's not really given much proof of where his funds come, not really explained himself, what he's about, never gave an interview, and he's allowed to run a football club and run it into the wall for years. So there's a lot of it was kind of anger and anxiety mixed up together, really.
And here's Omar Rizza on his perspective on the whole season.
Yeah, it was disastrous. It was really disastrous. At the end of the day, it's all part of my pathway. It's all part of my history. It's part of my development. It is what it is. Things like this happen, and it's how you deal with it and how you manage it and how you come out the end of it which is what I think is important.
And then finally, we go back to Dean Cox, club legend, who you'll recall was forced out of the club in September, unable to play for any other Football League club. Here's his take on what had happened that season.
Let's be honest, let's be very frank about it. He single-handedly ripped the heart out of the football club. It wasn't the football club that I'd known for so many years. It was very difficult to see it unravel, I must admit. Very, very hurt, and I'm still very bitter about it now.
And that, as always, on a very low note, brings us to the end of the penultimate, you'll all be happy to hear, episode of the Circus Upstairs. But it's not over quite yet, because though we've been relegated to the National League, we are still facing an appointment at court where Orient are facing a winding up order, which is due on the 12th of June. We're going to hear all about that in the next episode and what happens next. For the moment, James, thank you for all your insights and amazing stories about hummus today.
Yeah, I like to dip in and out of those when I can.
That is the worst joke you've made throughout the whole of this podcast series. And that is saying something.
I just want to make sure people are still listening, Matt.
No one's listening, but just in case, I will say thank you, and I hope you join us next time for the final episode.
Arrivederci.
That was a magnificent wave.
Yeah, sometimes go that way.
Oh, I see you're mixing it up. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, just never know which one I'm going to do, really. I'm trying some waves. I've been trying. I give like the Queen.